You know, we like to think of morality as this simple black and white battle between good and evil. You've got your heroes, you've got your villains, but what if it's not that simple? What if that line between right and wrong is, well, a lot blurrier than we think? And what if the potential for both incredible good and terrible evil lies within all of us, just waiting for the right situation to bring it out? To really get that, we've got to look a little deeper into the human mind. Okay, just take a second and really think about that. How does that story make you feel? For most people, there's a strong, immediate gut reaction, and it's usually, ugh, no, that's wrong. But here's the tricky part. Can you explain exactly why it's wrong, if nobody got hurt? That feeling, that little struggle to put a logical reason to your gut instinct, that's at the very heart of how our moral minds really work. And that feeling right there really reveals the central idea we're going to explore today. Our moral compass isn't just guided by logic and some rulebook we have in our heads. Nope, it's this complex mix of really deep emotions, gut feelings, and social pressures that are often running the show behind the scenes. And a lot of the time, our logical brain is just playing catch-up, scrambling to justify what our gut already decided a long time ago.
So first up, let's dive into those feelings. Where do these moral instincts even come from? Well, the answer starts with one of the most basic, most fundamental human emotions there is.
Empathy. It's this simple but incredibly powerful idea that your pain matters to me. It's why when you see someone slam their finger in a car door, you physically cringe. It's why even newborn babies will start crying if they hear another baby crying nearby. This isn't something we learn from a book. It seems to be hardwired into us from day one.
And what's really fascinating is that this instinct isn't just for humans. Check out this classic experiment. Scientists taught a chimp to pull a lever to get food. Easy enough. But then they changed the game. Now, pulling that same lever gave another chimp a painful electric shock. And what happened? The first chimp stopped pulling the lever. They literally chose to go hungry rather than cause pain to another. That shows a really basic but powerful form of moral concern.
Now, to understand just how crucial empathy is, you have to see what happens when it's missing. This quote, it's from a young mugger who specifically targeted blind people. And his response is, on a purely logical level, correct, but it is just chillingly inhuman. The whole point is that it is another person, and that's precisely why we should care. This total lack of empathy, it's one of the hallmarks of psychopathy.
So empathy is a huge moral feeling. The other big one is group loyalty. In this famous study, the Robbers Cave study, researchers took a bunch of regular 11-year-old boys and just randomly split them into two groups at a summer camp, the Eagles and the Rattlers. Within days, these kids developed this intense loyalty to their own group and started seeing the other group as the enemy, calling them dirty or goody-goodies.
And the researchers tried everything to make peace, but nothing worked. Peace talks between the kid leaders failed. Athletic competitions just made the rivalry worse. They tried sharing meals, which turned into massive food fights. Even having them watch movies together led to more fights. They even gave them sermons on brotherly love, which actually backfired. It just made each group bond tighter while hating the other guys even more. It was a perfect and kind of scary look at how deep our tribal instincts really run. So what finally worked? What could possibly fix this? The researchers created a problem that neither group could solve alone. They staged a crisis where the camp's main water line was cut, and all of a sudden they weren't eagles and rattlers anymore. They were just a bunch of thirsty campers who needed water. And that's the key. A shared goal, a common enemy, is one of the most powerful things in the world for bridging divides.
Okay, so we've got these powerful gut feelings. Empathy on one hand, tribal loyalty on the other. But we don't just feel our way through the world, we also think. So how do we move from pure instinct to actual reasoning? Let's take a look at the logical frameworks we build to make sense of all this.
Well, according to anthropologist Richard Schwader, cultures all over the world tend to build their morality on one of three main foundations. In Western cultures, like the US, we lean heavily on the ethic of autonomy. It's all about individual rights, freedom, you do you. But other cultures might prioritize community, your duty to the group, the hierarchy, or divinity, ideas about sacredness, purity, and sin. Think about a debate over a dress code. It could be an autonomy fight about personal freedom, a community fight about group standards, or a divinity fight about modesty. People aren't just disagreeing, they're speaking completely different moral languages.
And this brings us right back to where we started, with that brother and sister on vacation. That feeling you probably had, it has a name: moral dumbfounding. It's that moment when your gut just screams that's wrong, But your logical brain, which is probably running on that ethic of autonomy, can't find anyone who was actually harmed. It is the perfect example of our emotions grabbing the steering wheel while our logic is in the back seat just trying to figure out the map.
All right, now we have to turn to the most unsettling part of this whole story. We've talked about feelings and we've talked about logic, but what happens when both of those things get completely steamrolled by the power of a situation? This is where we see how ordinary, decent people like you and me, can be made to do truly terrible things.
So in the 1960s, in the shadow of the Holocaust, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram was wrestling with a huge question. Were the Nazis just uniquely evil, or could something like that happen anywhere? So he designed an experiment to answer a terrifying question. How far would an ordinary person go, just because someone in a lab coat told them to? The result was absolutely shocking. 65%. 65% of the participants, who were just regular people from the community, obeyed the experimenter and delivered what they thought were potentially fatal electric shocks to a total stranger. And they weren't monsters. You can hear on the recordings that they were deeply upset, but they kept flipping the switches.
But here's the most important part, the real genius of the experiment. It showed that it wasn't about the people, it was about the situation. Look at this. When the authority figure gave orders over the phone instead of in person, obedience plummeted to 21%. And when the participants saw just one other person refuse to go along, it dropped to just 10%. The lesson of Milgram isn't that we're all secretly evil. It's that situations can be designed to make good people do evil things.
So let's pull all these pieces together. What have we learned? We can actually create a kind of recipe, a set of opposing forces that push us towards either our best moral selves or our absolute worst.
So the forces for evil are things like de-individuation. That's when you lose your sense of self in a group. You feel anonymous. You're just following orders. And denigration, when you stop seeing other people as fully human. But on the other side, the forces for good include real contact, interacting with people, especially when you have a shared goal, just like in the Robbers Cave study. And the other big one is perspective taking, which brings us right back where we started, to empathy.
This quote from JFK is just a masterclass in perspective taking. He's not making some dry legal argument here. He's making a moral one. He's asking his white listeners to just for a second imagine themselves in a black person's shoes. It's a powerful, direct appeal to our shared humanity.
And this is exactly why storytelling, whether it's in books, movies, you name it, is one of the most powerful moral technologies we have ever invented. Stories are basically empathy machines. They let us live, just for a little while, inside someone else's mind and heart. They expand our circle of who we care about, way beyond our own little tribe.
So if there's one big thing to take away from all this, it's that morality isn't some fixed trait that you either have or you don't. It's something that is powerfully, deeply shaped by the situations we're in. We've seen the recipe for evil: anonymity, distance, obedience. But we've also seen the recipe for good: contact, shared goals, and empathy. So the real question, the one I want to leave you with, is this. Now that you know the recipe, how can you create the conditions for good in your own world?